Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel Stewart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous scene of a house. We're going to learn different types of brush techniques to paint blossom and create a gorgeous Bougainvillea plant. We're going to use different types of blues to create shadows on our walls and different types of white to create highlights to look like areas are in the sunlight. And then we're going to combine these tricks with some fine detail, and step by step we're going to learn how to paint this gorgeous Mediterranean house with a lovely sort of cherry blossom outside. So let's get into it. So welcome everybody, these are the colours that I use for the tutorial. They are titanium white, cad yellow, cad orange light, rose pink, magenta, sap green, iris purple, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, raw umber brown and ivory black. Now I've got a large canvas here, I think it's A2, and I've used raw sienna to create an outline. If you'd like to pause the video and copy the outline, it might make your life a lot easier. But all we're going to have this lovely Mediterranean house with some window shutters. We're going to have a nice colourful door. We're going to have this beautiful tree in the foreground with lots of blossom. And that's going to cascade a shadow onto the white walls, which we're going to use cool blues. We're going to have some flower pots at the bottom, some steps and some cobblestone floor, and a rickety old bike to the right just to finish off the composition. So pause the video, copy down the outline, and we'll get started. Now I'm going to speed the video up a tiny bit because we're not doing anything technical, and when I'm going to do anything technical or anything you need to pay attention, I'll put the speed back down to a normal pace. But all I'm doing is literally just colouring in my outline with some cerulean blue. The great thing about using a raw sienna outline is you still can see the outline underneath your paint. So it's a great thing if you're just using watery paint at the beginning, just to get your bearings and the colours. And then what we can do later, we can thicken up the paint and neaten everything up. But just for now, we're just going to get everything blocked in so we know where everything is. And as I say, I'll put the video down to a slower speed when you need to pay attention. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just getting some cerulean blue and a little bit of water, and I'm just colouring in these beautiful wooden shutters. So in the Mediterranean they paint all their houses white just for the sun, and you have these lovely blossom trees. So all I've done here, I've mixed a tiny bit of sap green and cobalt blue, and I'm just putting in some background colour for our tree. You don't have to do this stage if you don't want to, because we're going to cover all this up with blossom. I was just testing about because at the beginning of the painting I didn't know what I was going to paint. A lot of these ideas come out of my imagination. So I was going to paint a nice sort of like an apple tree or an orange tree, but I changed my mind after I'd blocked it in. But if you'd like to, you can always just mix some cobalt blue and some sap green and block in your tree. If not, just fast forward and we'll block in the rest. So all I'm doing, I'm using cobalt blue just to create a base colour, and then I'm going to mix some yellow and some sap green to get a lighter green. So yellow and sap green, and I'm just pushing my brush against it to create texture. So an easy trick, if you lay a dark undercolour first, and then if you use a lighter colour, you can create the illusion of leaves if you ever want to paint a tree. It's just an easy trick. Now I'm going to slow the video back down. I'm going to show you how to make these two types of blue that I've got pre-mixed. All you do is you create two big dollops of white. So we've got two big dollops of white, and in the first one we're going to just put white and cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. So white, cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And in the second one we're going to do the same. We're going to put white, cerulean blue and cobalt blue, but this time we're going to add a little bit of purple and less white. So a little bit of purple and less white in the second one. The first one is just white, a little bit of cerulean blue and a tiny dot of cobalt blue. And what you should have is two pastel blues. So one's very light and one's very cool because it's got more cobalt blue and more purple into it. And we're going to use them as our shades. So when these beautiful white houses get shade, we're going to use these cool blues to emphasize that. So let's get the darker one first. And where this tree is cascading a nice shadow onto the white bright wall, we're just going to colour it in. So we're just creating a rough shape of these blossom and these leaves sort of cascading on the white background. So all we're doing, we're just blocking in a shape. We'll change it about and put some detail in later. We just want to get a rough shape using this lovely cool purpley blue. And we can have a little bit of shadow here from the tree trunk. Why not? Just coming down the wall behind this tree and the plant pot. And then let's have a little bit of shadow from the rickety old bike. This could be a nice little flower bike. Just cascading here underneath. So just easy trick, just to block her in and underneath the window. I'm going to put a little flower basket underneath the window and underneath these shutters. So let's just have some blue either side of it. Now don't worry if your painting looks scruffy. We're just blocking everything in, so don't worry if it looks a bit rough. We just want to make sure we know where everything is. So the other side of the wall is going to be bright white. So all this area is going to be in the sun. Now acrylics, when you first lay them onto your canvas, look really vibrant and really posh and lovely. And they always dry a bit rubbish and they dry a bit streaky. That is to be expected. Don't get nervous or get annoyed. You sometimes have to lay, especially with white, a few coats of paper because the paint is so watery that at first it looks very vibrant, but as it dries it absorbs a bit of the canvas underneath and it just looks a bit ropey. So don't worry about that. But as you can see, if you thicken up the paint by just adding less water and lots more paint, and you give it a dry and give it a second coat, you can lay much more brighter white, which we'll do in a minute. But we're just getting the feel of everything where we want everything to be. It's quite a complicated painting, so let's take our time and do everything right. So we're going to mix some raw umber brown and some cobalt blue. So raw umber brown and cobalt blue. And we're just going to block in a very dark colour here for our tree. This is just going to be a base colour for our tree. So all we're doing, I'm just using a fine liner for the branches. It's much easier to do thinner branches with a thinner brush, so that's what I'm doing. And we're just going to lay this dark colour just as a foundation so we can put all the highlights and detail over the top. So cobalt blue and some raw umber brown, you get a very dark shadow colour that is not black because it's still quite dark blue. It's like a Prussian blue. And this is perfect for our underneath colour, and we can try things out with our lovely tree. Now I'm going to have a little plant pot here, which we're going to put some flowers in towards the end, which is a little shadow here. But all we're going to do, we're just going to colour her in. So let's just block her in. Let's just have another little branch, break it off here. Don't worry, as I say, if it's scruffy or it dries a bit rubbish like here. You can just go over the top, look, with thicker paint. Just wait till it dries and you can just neaten her up. So now we've got this lovely underpainting. If you mix a little bit of raw umber with some white, we can start putting on some bark shape. So raw umber and white. And all I'm going to do, look, I'm just going to leave little gaps for that dark blue to shine through, and this looks like little ridges, little bits of bark. So just a little bit of raw umber and white. Can add a tad of orange if you want to, just to make it warmer. So this area of the tree is much more in the sunlight, so that's why it's got a nice warm colour. And we'll leave the left hand side because we'll make a darker, cooler colour. So on the right hand side where it's getting the sunlight of all these branches, we're just going to put a highlight. And as I say, we're just gauging where everything's going to be. This is not the final thing. We're just trying to get all the colours right. So let's just do this bit. Skews the focus. So there we go. And then on the left hand side, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to mix some purple and some brown and white. So we're going to add purple, brown and white to make it cooler. And we're going to put a little bit of cobalt blue into that mix. So purple, brown, cobalt blue and a little bit of white. And we should get a nice bluey, browny grey. So there we go, just at the bottom here. And this is going to be the opposite. It's not as warm. These areas are more in the shade, but it's the same principle. All we're going to do is go leave gaps for that very dark sort of Prussian blue underneath to shine through. And we're just going to colour in the left hand side of the tree, just gently blending it. And what that should do is make our tree trunk look more 3D. So one area is in the shade and one area is in the sunlight. And we're just going to colour in this branch a little bit. So you can do this with any tree. If you just make one side a bit more darker and cooler and make the other side a little bit warmer, it makes it look nice and 3D. And I'm going to get some yellow and cad orange light. So cad yellow and cad orange light to make a really vibrant orange, and some white to make it more of a peach colour. Add a tiny bit of brown just to make it a little bit less vibrant. We'll test this out. We'll see if it's too bright or if it's okay. Let's see. I think that's a bit too bright, but we'll try it out first. There's nothing we can't paint over and fix. Sometimes it's good to just try things out. So all I'm doing, I'm just putting some highlights on the right hand side. So this area I want to look like it's in the sun a bit. Just gently blending it. Let's just have some highlights coming down to this tree, this branch, excuse me. So the brighter the highlight, all you have to do is thicken up the paint. So if I get no water and just get a big blob of paint, look, I can make it a lot more brighter, a lot more harsh. And I could do the opposite. If I want to soften an area, I can just use my finger or just gently blend it into the darker colour. So this outer edge, just want to be a little bit brighter. Okay, so now we're going to get some raw umber and white. So raw umber and white. Sorry, it's a bit off screen. I will zoom in 2 seconds. So raw umber and white. We're going to add a little bit of yellow to the mix and a tiny bit of purple. So raw umber, white, some yellow and a tiny bit of purple. And we're just going to try to bridge the gap here. If you add a little bit of purple, it just makes it a little bit more grayer. It's not as harsh because it's got less yellow in it. And all we're going to do, we're just going, because it's a big jump from the really warm area to the really purpley cool area, we're just trying to bridge the middle bit here with this sort of nice grey sort of tone. It's like an in-between, some warm, some cool. Just link the two areas of the tree together. There we go. And then all I'm going to do now is just get some pure raw umber brown. So just pure brown. And I'm just, where I've gone over some of the gaps in the bark, I'm just using this raw umber brown just here on the right. So these areas again are in the sun. So even though they are a bit harsh shadows, they're not as dark and not as cool as that lovely dark colour we mixed up, that blue and raw umber. And because it's just pure raw umber, it looks a bit more warm and more again in the sun. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just poking some gaps in between the colour just so it looks like tree bark. As I say, you can soften things up with your fingers. So let's just do the same. Just everything on the right hand side. Let's get in a little bit of sunlight. So let's just do some of the branches again. And as I say, it's much easier to use a really fine brush. It's just like using a really sharp pencil for fine detail when you're drawing. It makes your life so much easier if you just have the brushes for each occasion. So if you buy a multi-pack of brushes, you should get a multi-pack for about $5 to $10, £5 to £10, and it'll have all the brushes you need for this tutorial. Things like a fine liner, a fan brush, an elongated brush with really fine detail, a flat brush, things like that. So what I'm doing, look, I'm just painting just the branches in with this raw umber brown, and then just using that lighter tone, that more grayer tone, again just putting a bit of a softer highlight here just on this edge. As I say, we can go over things later, we can see how it dries. Sometimes with acrylics, as I say, it looks really nice when you first lay the paint down, and when it dries it can dry quite scruffy. So coming back to things as we go along, move forward in the painting is always good, so we can see how everything works. And then if we have to neaten it up later, that's no bother. So I'm just putting this more lighter grey sort of brown. So a good way to make grain is greys is to just add purple and brown and some white and just a tiny bit of yellow, and you should get this nice sort of cool grey. But it's still got a little bit of warmth in it because it's got some yellow in it. You can even add a tad of cad orange light, and then I'm just adding the brighter highlight just on the right hand side. So if I want areas that are really sparkling in the sun, I just use the harsher, brighter highlight. And as I say, when areas are dry, you can just go over the top and make them look more vibrant as they dry. So don't be afraid to, as I say, try things out and experiment. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. So we've got this nice blocked in tree now, so I'm happy with my tree. So that's all good, and we've got these nice shadows, and we've got our wall, and we know where everything kind of is now. So now we can start working on everything and neaten everything up so it doesn't look as scruffy and as basic. So I'm going to get a fan brush out of my pot. So let's get a fan brush, and I'm going to get some purple, so some of this iris purple, and I'm going to get this colour called magenta. So I'm going to mix magenta and purple to get a darker sort of purpley pink. So by adding, you can either add purple or some cobalt blue to some pink, just to get a darker colour. Now a fan brush is fantastic for texture, so I'm just using the very corner of the brush and I'm just pushing against the surface, and it leaves these sort of fan imprints on my canvas. And this is excellent for creating leaves. If you're ever painting anything like a tree, or if you wanted to paint fur on an animal or hair on a person, it's really good because it looks very textured. And all I'm doing, a bit like the tree bark, oops, I think I've picked up a little bit more pink on this side, but it doesn't matter. We'll just block her in. All I'm doing is leaving gaps in the underpainting to shine through. So having a little bit of that dark greeny blue underneath is creating the image of shadows. So there we go. Let's say, don't worry if it's scruffy, we'll neaten everything up in a minute. So we always lay a dark colour, and then we're just going to get pure magenta now, and our clean fan brush. So clean your brush and just get some pure magenta. And then you can give it a couple of minutes to dry, or you can blitz it with a hairdryer. And we're just going to go over the top. And we're just going to leave gaps again for that darker purple to shine through. And I'm just hitting the corner of this fan brush against the canvas. So what we're trying to do is we're going to lay a shadow colour, which is the purpley colour. And then we're going to put magenta down, which is sort of the in-between, sort of the middle colour. And then what we'll do is we'll put a highlight colour over the top. Now, as I say, look how vibrant that looks when we're laying it down. That looks so gorgeous and vibrant. But unfortunately, the acrylic paint is going to merge, this bright magenta is going to merge with some of that darker purple underneath, and it's going to dry a lot flatter. So that's why I said sometimes you just have to go over your work twice if you want it to have that vibrancy when using acrylics. Oil painting, not so much. You can do it first time, but oil paints are so much harder to use, and so much messier, and they're more expensive. So acrylics are really, really good when you're first learning, and as you advance, you can combine the two and start using oils. So let's have a little bit of the blossom coming down. You have these gorgeous Bougainvillea, I think that's how you pronounce it, trees in Spain and in like the Mediterranean, like Italy and Greece, all these beautiful places. So all I'm doing, I'm just smearing it, leaving those gaps for the underpainting to shine through, just so it looks like texture. Let's say take your time. It's lovely and relaxing painting, especially using a fan brush and creating this sort of beautiful blossom. So just take your time, enjoy it. And then we're just going to get this rose pink, which all it is, you can use magenta and white or pink and white. It's just a light pastel pink. So again, we're just going to go over the top. And this is going to be our final colour. So again, we're just doing the same technique. So none of this is hard. It's just time consuming. And things like plotting a house and using straight lines and things in a painting, it's just a little bit difficult because you have to use things like a ruler. But as I say, the more you prep and the more you take your time at the beginning, the more relaxed and easier it is, because you're organised when painting. And if you're organised and relaxed, when you go to paint, it makes it so much easier to get in the, as I like to call it, the flow state, where you can just do your best work and just go with the flow and enjoy it. So there we go. Put some highlights here, just so it all ties together. And we have some blossom. Now while it's drying, I'm just going to get some of the blue, and I'm just going to poke some sky holes in it. So these are all the bits of little holes in between the branches. So I'm just using a fine liner, and I'm just getting some of that lovely blue that we used, and I'm just going to start breaking up the blossom and poking these little sky holes using the fine liner, just to make it look realistic. So now we've got all the blocked in lovely colour of our sort of cherry blossom, or this pink. By using this bright blue and using a fine liner, I can just make loads of little dots, look, just random dots, and poke holes. And it's starting to trick your eye, can you see that? It's starting to make it look more realistic. So this is a really, really easy trick when painting trees. If you work on the blending and the texture of your leaves first, and then use the sky colour, or in our case the background colour, to poke holes in it, it then looks like gaps in between. I'm using a tiny bit of green and yellow just to put a little hint of leaves. And again, just by poking some of these sky holes, So a little bit of sap green and some cad yellow, just to poke some little holes. So these could be a little bit of the green leaves around the tree that you get in between some of the blossom. It's the same technique, just poke little holes. Don't need many of them. I think it's just a nice pretty extra because you have a hint of it, just so it looks all nice and vibrant. So bright green and yellow, just so it's really bright. And then, as I say, if you get some pink and white, and if your tree does dry a bit flat and you want to really emphasize your highlights, look, by just going over the top of them. So I'm just using the edge of a fine liner. I've got big dollops of this white and pink, and I'm just pushing against the canvas to imprint the illusion of little bits of blossom, make it look nice and pretty. So as I say, take your time. Now you know the techniques, you should be able to paint any tree. But we always need to put the dark colour on first, because you wouldn't notice these beautiful highlights over the top if you didn't have the darker purple and the darker magenta background for them to stand out against, you see. And it just creates this texture effect. So I'm just going to speed it up a little bit just while I'm doing it. So I'm just bridging all the gaps, just so the whole tree looks a bit better. Because we're having the light come from the right, I'm just adding a little bit more pink as we move across. Just a little bit more of that magenta. I'm just having a lighter shade on the right hand side. So while she's drying, let's start neatening her up. Let's get some of the cool blue. So let's do the doors and the shutters first. So let's get a big dollop of cerulean blue. Now cerulean blue is lovely, it's really, really bright. Let's add a tiny bit of white to it, so it's nice and thick. We've got this big glob of paint. Let's start painting the door and all the shutters. So now we're going to start making everything look a bit more pretty, but we're going to do the same techniques. So we're just going to add all these little sky holes, and we're just going to gently block in the door. Don't worry if it's not straight, we can neaten that up in a minute. We just want to cover up our outline and just make it not look so ropey. Get rid of all those watery brush marks. So nice thick paint on your brush, please. You don't have to use as much water. So again, I'm just going to fast forward the video a little bit, but it's the exact same technique. You can just add little sky holes, and again we're just going to block in our door. Put the letterbox and everything back in a minute. And then let's just do our shutters. So let's just make this window shutter nice and neat. You can see now by just using thicker paint and taking your time how much professional and how much brighter it looks. It looks just much more refined, doesn't it? So as I say, at home if you're struggling with your work a little bit and you can't understand why it looks a little bit scrappy, don't be afraid to dry it with a hairdryer and just thicken up the paint and go over the top. Look at this area, just this one area, just going over the top. Look how much neater it looks. Just by taking your time, drying the work with a hairdryer and just repainting areas. So let's do this shutter. It looks so much more vibrant. Oh, I want to go on holiday. I want to go somewhere hot, sit in the sun, sit with my wife and my little daughter, somewhere nice and eat nice food. Oh, some bread and alioli and some olives for starters. That sounds good. Getting it on the imagination already. So sorry if I'm making you hungry. So back to the tutorial. So we've blocked in our shutters and we're just going to add some more cerulean blue to the mix. and a little bit of cobalt blue to make it darker. So cerulean blue and cobalt blue, and a tiny bit of purple. We should get a nice sort of royal blue, so it's a bit brighter and darker. We're going to a tiny bit of brown just to suck a bit of the colour out, and a little bit of white just so it's not so harsh. And this is going to be our shadow colour for our shutters. So we've got a blocked in colour, which is just cerulean blue and a tiny bit of white. And then now this is going to be our shadow colour. So we're doing the same technique, we're just poking some holes in our lovely Bougainvillea blossom, our lovely sort of cherry blossom. And we're just going to start making sort of rough shapes of sort of spiky, leafy areas below it. So it looks like it's casting a shadow onto these shutters, you see. So the reason we're using this darker colour is just this is going to be all the areas that are getting a bit of shade from the bright sun. So again, I'm just going to put some dark blue here just on this ridge because there's a little bit of a wall and just at the bottom of the door. But we'll neaten it up in a minute. We'll use some tape and stuff. I'll show you a little trick to do paint straight lines because straight lines are quite hard to paint. So don't worry if it's a bit wonky right now. So all we're going to do, we're just going to make these sort of little rough shapes. Just coming in here. We can add our little holes in the background. We're going to do the same here, just around this branch. So it's just casting a shadow. Just where some of these leaves got a nice bit of shade. So if you think of it, any shadow you can kind of make using blues and purples. It's just an easy trick. And it makes your work look much more 3D. So if you mix up any colour and then just add some blue and purple to make a darker shade, you can just add any shadow to it. Let's just neaten that bit up. Let's just have some here in the bottom corner. Just put some little holes in between. And then just have some coming down here. Let's say if you go over it, don't worry, we can neaten anything up. It's the great thing about acrylics, it's nothing we can't just paint over. And then let's get some more cobalt blue. Let's just make it a little shade darker. And some more brown, just so it's less vibrant. And let's just make it just a little shade darker, just underneath. So sometimes, as I say, with acrylics, when you first lay it down, it was a really, really cloudy day when I was painting this. And even though I have lots of natural light, you can see, look, the light is changing because a cloud would go over my house and it would really darken up like the footage and the painting, and then it would disappear and the sun would come out and it would look really, really bright. So sometimes with your painting, as I say, it's worth just giving it 5 minutes and just seeing if, as it dries, if it's too dark or too light. And just to darken it up, as I say, you can just add a little bit more cobalt blue and it just brings a bit more harshness. So we're just going to do the same here on this shutter. So this is going to have a little cascade of a shadow here of this blossom just here. And let's just have a little bit here hanging over. But all this does is create a 3D effect. And I'm going to have a little sort of hanging basket here. So I'm just going to create a little shadow, pre-emphasize it, like, because we're going to have a little hanging basket just on that little window ledge, just to make it look more pretty, I think. Why not? So I'm just going over it. So just like highlights, same with shadows, just going over it twice sometimes just makes the paint thicker. It just makes everything look more vibrant and realistic. So this is a really easy trick when you're painting straight things like buildings, doors, windows, is to use painting tape, and you can get nice straight lines. So we've got our dark blue and our light blue that we mixed at the beginning, do you remember? And one was cerulean blue, cobalt blue and just white for the lighter blue. And one was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, less white and a little bit of purple for this darker blue. And all we're going to do is we're going to go over the top of our shadows. And now that we've got that lovely paint, look, we can just flatten it against the painting. Just make sure your painting is dry before you put tape down, so it doesn't take off all your nice painting underneath. And we can create straight lines. And then the other thing we can do, look, if we just go over the top and just make our shadow look more pretty and refined, is we can still poke some of these sky holes to make it look like that darker shade of wall that's a bit in the shade is still peeking through some of the leaves. So, but just going over with thicker paint, we can make everything look much more refined and professional and nicer. So all I'm doing, I'm just poking some holes, and I'm just going to create a shadow underneath here. Again, just going around the blossom. And I'm trying to make the edges of the shadows quite spiky, just so it looks like some of the leaves are reflecting onto the wall. And then the same with some titanium white. So where I have used a little bit of raw sienna just to stain my canvas, some of it's shining underneath and some of the outline is shining underneath. And the problem with white is even if you use thick paint, sometimes it's a bit see-through, it's a bit transparent. So again, by just going over the top using thick paint, we can just clear that up. And what we're going to start doing is we're going to put some of these little sky holes, these little bits of sunlight, on our shadows. So if I load up my brush with some paint, let's put some little dots. And these are all the bits of sunlight coming through the leaves in between the shadows and bleaching that white wall. And again, all these little added bits of detail just create the realism. And don't worry if your white mixes a bit with your blue shadow. You can always just dry it or let it dry for 5 minutes and then just go over the top with some more white paint and just make it more vibrant. But all we're trying to do is just poke some little holes into the shadows just so the shadows look more real. So let's just neaten up this area. So I'm just going to fast forward the footage a little bit because all I'm doing is just using white paint to block in. It's nothing technical, it's nothing hard. But as I say, using tape saves your life. If you're ever painting anything like buildings in the background, I had to paint a pier once and using tape was so much easier than trying to measure everything and have all the straight lines for all the legs of a pier. So if you're painting things like windows, buildings, it makes your life so much easier just having tape. So don't forget, if you haven't liked and subscribed to the channel, please do so. The more people who like and subscribe, the more other artists get to see these tutorials and learn from them. So thank you so much everyone who supports the channel. Thank you so much to everyone who regularly sends me your work on Instagram and Facebook and tags me at mstewartpaintings. If you paint any of these tutorials, please tag me at mstewartpaintings and I can shout them out. It's great for me to meet people and it's great to see people improve and do these fantastic tutorials and even put a bit of their own spin on some of them to make them unique and different, which is really, really cool. It's a sign of a great artist if you take something and improve it or make it your own. So don't worry, look, if I have my finger a bit smudged with a bit of paint, but actually we're going to poke some sky holes. We're using the white, so it's kind of like a, as Bob Ross would say, a happy accident. So now look, we're starting to put these little holes of white where the sunlight is sparkling through. It's starting to trick your eyes, isn't it? It's starting to look realistic. So if you just think cool blues for shadows and bright whites for highlights. And we can create this gorgeous realism. And I appreciate this tutorial's longer and harder for people. So well done everyone for trying it at home. I'm trying to do a mixture because obviously we're starting to get a big following and we're starting to get a good lot of people subscribing and watching the tutorials. So I'm trying to do ones for beginners, some tutorials for beginners, some for more intermediate artists. And I think as well, like, I don't really like painting buildings. I don't really like painting people. I like painting animals and I like painting landscapes. So we're going to start trying to do different things because it's good to get out of your comfort zone and try different things because it's the only way to improve. So as I say, well done for everyone if you're attempting this at home because it is a quite technical painting and it's quite fiddly. Nothing's really hard. It's just quite fiddly, like measuring things and trying to paint straight lines. So what I'm doing, I'm just using my cool blue just around that window. And as I say, I'm just neatening up areas where I've gone a bit wonky. Just making that area a bit darker so it has a nice cool ridge. And we're going to have some nice steps. So this could be the steps out the front door where he's parked his bike. And then we're going to have a little plant pot here. So I'm just going to create a little shadow. And let's just have some shadows on the steps from the tree above. We'll neaten it all up later. And then this could be in the shade. And then under the tree. So let's just put some of this cool blue under that step. And just create some little shadows coming underneath. I think my steps are a bit wonky, so I'm just going to make them a little bit more 3D. So let's just make this a bit chunkier. So we're going to mix some cerulean blue and lots of white. So cerulean blue and lots of white. And we're just going to paint some of these little sky holes into our shadows on our door. And then when you're happy with it, if you just dry your work. And we're just going to use tape again. So you can see with the light, a cloud must have just come over to make it look really dark. So let's just make this a bit chunkier. And then we're going to get some white and some cerulean blue. So lots of white and some cerulean blue. And we're just going to poke some of these little sky holes to have some of the sunlight on this front door. And when you're happy with that, if you just dry it with a hairdryer before applying some tape, because as I say, you don't want to take the paint off. And what we're going to do, we're just going to put it on the ridge of the door. So we're going to use the tape going straight up to the ridge of the door. And we're going to do the same on the other side. So we just go right up to the ridge of the door. So there we go. And then we're going to swap to a fine liner. So we've got these nice straight bits of tape. We're going to get some of that cerulean blue and a little bit of the dark colour that we mixed up earlier, which was cerulean blue, purple, and a little bit of raw umber brown. And with a fine liner, we're just going to go up to the edge of that painting tape. And we're just going to come straight down. And we're just going to put some ridges in our door just to make it look more 3D. So again, this painting tape really helps create a nice fine line if you struggle painting straight lines. And then we're just going to come under here, we'll put our letterbox back. And I'm using a really thin brush, so it's much easier to do thin lines. So there we go. So let's just come into the middle. Let's have a bit here. Try having roughly the same height and everything. And then at the bottom here, just so it all matches. Mine's a bit wonky, but it doesn't matter. And then if we get a bit of tape and we put it in the middle, so let's put a bit of tape in the middle, we can do the same just down the middle. So we just go right up to the ridge, just join these areas together to create sort of a cross shape in the middle. So we should have sort of a cross. So let's test it out. Yeah, that's looking cool. And let's just do the other side. Sorry, I just moved it to show you. So let's do the other side first. Join it all together. Oops. I kind of smeared mine, but it doesn't matter. As I say, you can always neaten it up. You can use a baby wipe. Or just smear it with your finger. And then let's get a little rectangle in the middle. This could be our letterbox. So there we go, just have a little letterbox. Oh, I've missed a bit here, so let's just join this area up. There we go. Just going over the top. So take your time, there's no rush. As I say, do it at your own speed at home. If you find it's quite technical, just go slower than the video. And then remove our tape, and then we put back in our shadows. So I've just add a little bit more white to my cerulean blue. I'm just trying to join up some of the shadows that are on the wall, just so it looks all realistic. So these are all the bits of the door that are just sparkling in the sunlight. So let's have some over here. Let's join this area up. And then I'm just going to have a little bit of the door, just sort of the outer rim, just sort of shimmering in the light. Just coming down here, just on that wood. So I'm just smudging it with my finger just so it's not so harsh. It's kind of just like a sort of a glimmer. So when you have something like wood, glass or something, it gets that nice sort of sheen where the sunlight's hitting one side. So let's just do that on the panels and in the middle here. And by just smearing it with your finger, you can just make it softer, just so it's nice harsh. So I'm just using these blues, as I say, these highlights, just to give the door more 3D effect. And just on the left here, even though this area will probably be a bit more in the shade, we're just going to have some of these sparkles coming down. And if you've got any wonky edges or anything, you can just always paint over it, as I say. There's nothing you can't fix. There's a great thing about YouTube, you can just pause the video. If we're going too fast or too slow, you can fast forward. So go at your own speed. If you have to pause it and fix your painting or areas, no worries. Come back to us. So let's just neaten up this corner. Here we go. And then we're just going to get some purple, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and a bit of raw umber brown. So purple, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and a bit of raw umber brown. We're just going to make this sort of bluey grey. So adding all these blues, a little bit of purple and brown, we get this nice cool dark grey. So let's just add a bit more brown just to make it greyer. So it should be nice and saturated. There we go, nice bluey grey. And then just under the tree, I'm just going to use a ruler. Again, if you haven't got a ruler, you can use the painting tape trick. And I'm just going to make this area just a tiny bit darker, because this outer ridge is just really in the shade. I'm just going to smear it with my finger so it's not so harsh. And then just here at the base of the door, I'm just using the fine liner just to make it look more defined, using this dark colour. So rather than use black, we can use this sort of dark blue, and it doesn't look as harsh, but it still gives a nice harsh outline, but it doesn't look as cartoony as using black. So let's just do our letterbox. Let's do the hole in the middle. And then let's just do this, the left hand side of these ones, just because they'd be a bit more in the shade if the sun's coming from the right. And I'm just using that colour just under the tree, just itself, just under some of the blossom, and the same just behind some of this branch. So these are harshest shadows, again the most shade. So let's just have a few bits just here under this one in the foreground. Just ever so slightly. And then we're just going to use that colour and a ruler, and we're just going to create an outer edge for our window shutters. So it's much easier, as I say, to create a straight line with a ruler. But some of these houses are quite little and they're quite wonky with the sort of white clay walls. So don't worry too much. It's part of the charm, being a bit wonky and a bit ragged around the edges, like most of us. So look, we're just going to use that ruler and we're just going to create a nice dark edges. So this window could be shut. And then the other one could be open. So there we go. And then we're just going to colour in this window with this dark colour. So we're just going to block this bit in. So if I zoom in for you so you can see it easier. So again, we're just going to block it in. Don't worry if it's slightly wonky, we can straighten it up in a minute with the ruler. We just want to get the dark colour on first. So just like always, we put the shadows on first, and then we can put some highlights and detail on in a minute. So let's just block in the last one. And then we've got a nice glass window. There we go. And then let's just get our ruler. Just create a nice harsh edge here. And then just underneath. Now see, look, I shouldn't do it with just by hand because it goes wonky. So it's much better to use a ruler. Just trying to create a harsh edge just on that corner. And let's have a little doorbell. So let's have a little, I don't know, a little street sign here, a little doorbell. And then all I'm going to do, I'm just going to get some cerulean blue, and I'm just going to go over this bit, just make it less drunk and wonky. There we go, that looks better. And then let's just straighten you up. So as I say, it's nothing you can't fix, so don't ever panic if you're like me and you can't paint a straight line to save your life. You can always just wait for it to dry and just paint over it. Okay, so everything is starting to take shape. So let's just get some white and put some really sharp sparkles coming through this blue. This is looking cool. So just having some white with a tiny bit of cerulean blue. We can just put some sparkles here on the window now we've blocked her in. And let's have some here on this one. Now we've got that lovely harsh shadow. So we need our harsh shadows for our highlights to pop. So that yin and yang, sort of the nice contrast between the two. So let's just have some coming down here. So as you can see, it's the same trick over and over and over again. It's just using different shades to do it. So I'm just going to get some raw umber, and I'm literally just going to create a rectangle. So I've just got some raw umber brown. Oops, got a bit of a smudge. We'll fix that in a minute. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to create sort of a little window box with some flowers in it. So just again, just add some detail, make it look all pretty. Spring is in the air, so why not? And I'm going to mix some orange, some pink, a little bit of yellow and some white. So orange, a little bit of pink, tiny dot of yellow and some white, and you should get a peach colour. Just a tiny bit more yellow, why not? Just a tiny bit. So we should get a nice peachy colour. And all we're going to do, we're just going to create a sort of highlight area. So these, again, are just bits of the window box, so getting a bit of the sun. And if we want to darken it up, all we do is just add a little bit more pink and a little bit of brown. And we should get sort of a colour like a brick. So just by adding a little bit more pink and a little bit more brown, we should get this sort of nice, it's not a red, it's kind of like a nice sort of browny red. And I'm just going to get some sap green, and I'm just going to imply, you can add a little bit of yellow if you want to, just imply some leaves. So just get some sap green. We can have some of these leaves and sort of vines hanging over the top. And while that's drying, I'm just going to go back and poke in some more white holes. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to multitask because the painting's quite complicated. While one area is drying, I'm just going back and working other areas. So if it seems like I'm jumping back and forth, it's just this is actually more realistic to do it, to tell you the truth. It's much easier to, while you've got certain areas drying and you're happy with them, you can concentrate on putting little finishing touches on the other areas. So what I'm doing, I'm just using a fine liner, I'm just poking little white holes. So as I said, like some of the highlights that look super vibrant earlier have dried a bit flat. So just by going over the top with that white, look, just make them more vibrant. Let's just have some here on this wall. But it doesn't take much to make her look really realistic. And then let's just get some of that lighter blue and just poke some of them. They've dried a bit flat again, haven't they? So they look really noticeable when you first lay them down, but then unfortunately they dry. You see the light switch there when a cloud went past. Bloody clouds. So there we go. So let's come back to our box. This is a bit dry now. So let's just get some bright yellow. And then let's just make some little flowers. So what I'm doing, I'm just using a fine liner and just pushing against the canvas. Just creating some little blobs. And these can be little flower heads in the box. You can add some pink or some of that peach colour if you want. It's up to you. You can do your flowers any other colour. So let's have some of that peach colour, just so there's a little bit of difference in them. So let's have some hanging over the box. Some on this side coming over. There we go. Make it a bit brighter with some white, so you can add a tiny bit of white to your yellow. So some of them can be in the sun, some of them can be in the shade. So let's have some more hanging down here. Some yellow. And then all I'm doing, I'm just using some of the shadow colour that we blocked in the windows with. Some of that sort of browny bluey grey. And I'm just going around the underneath, just so it looks like it's cascading the shadow on the left. So again, it's not real any detail, it's just trick of the eyes with the colours. And let's clean our brush. You can have some pink ones. So it's all nice and pretty. And then I'm just going to get some pure white and just over the top of some of them on the right, where we've got the dark shadow on the left, I'm just going to have some highlights here on the right, just so it looks like these ones are in the sun. And then, oops, I think I picked up the wrong blue. That one's a bit too harsh. Let's go back to our cool blue that we mixed up earlier. And then it's just neaten up this shadow here. So these flowers would be just cascading a little bit of a shadow here on the white wall. So again, look, it's the same principle. If you paint anything in, just create a shadow for it. And then we can just put some little shimmers here. Just neaten you up. Just a few this side. And then all I'm going to do, I've just got a little bit more white in the cerulean blue. I'm just going to do the same trick that we did with the door. I'm just going to put a bit of shimmer on the wood. And then let's just go over, just neaten this area up. Looks a bit scruffy. So let's just put some of the shimmers here. I'm just mixing some of the shadow colour with a little bit of cobalt blue and brown. I'm just going to make a darker blue, but it's still got white in it. And I'm just going to put some shimmers in the glass. And then while that's drying, I'm just getting some of the bright pink, and I'm just going over the right hand side. So as I say, if we have the sun come from the right, we're just going to make the blossom on the right a little bit brighter. So on the left it's nice and dark, and then we've got some of this bright pink here on the right. So all I'm doing, I'm just glazing over the top of it. We've got all the nice texture already done, and we've got all these little holes put in. So I'm just colouring in over the top. And then I'm just mixing a little bit more white into the mix. And again, just on the right hand side, I'm just pushing my brush gently against the canvas. And I'm just leaving the darker pink as an outline, just to create the illusion of leaves. So just on the right, just so it looks like some of this blossoms in the sunlight. And then if you go back and forth with the two shades, you can just sort of mix the area together, just so there's not such a harsh jump from one to the other. So just by going back and forth with the lighter and the darker colour, you can just merge this area and just blend it, so you hardly notice the jump. And you can also, if you want to, you can start building up the blossom just underneath the trees by just making little dots just underneath the branches, excuse me, just so it starts to look a bit more realistic. And then let's just get some of our brown and cobalt blue. So we don't want to use black, so we're going to use raw umber brown and cobalt blue. And then let's put a little bit of white into it, just so it's not as harsh. And let's just build up our steps here. So let's just have a nice rectangle for our steps. And then we're going to paint a plant pot. So we're going to get some orange and some pink. So orange and pink to make a sort of reddy colour. Add a little bit of brown. So orange, pink and brown. And a little bit of purple. And we should get a sort of a brick colour like we did with the hanging basket. And we're just going to paint sort of the colour of a plant pot that's in the shade. So that's why we're making it a little bit darker. So this plant pot's sort of hanging behind a step, so it's a bit more darker. So again, we put the shadow colour on first, and then we'll put all the detail and the highlights on the top. So we'll block her in first, and then let's get a little bit of purple. And just on this outer ridge, by just adding a little bit of purple, we can use cobalt blue. We're just going to make that have a little bit of a harsh shadow, so it just looks like that step is sort of leaning against it. So you can add a little bit of cobalt blue if you want, just to make it darker. And then let's just get some sap green and just start making some wiggly lines to create a plant. So this could be a funky, nice plant. So just get some sap green, just create some wiggly lines coming out. And then we're going to get some bright pink, and we're just going to create dots for the blossom. So this could be little flowers in the plant pot. So again, just like we did the little flowers on the hanging basket, on the window ledge, we're just doing the same. You don't have to do them pink if you don't want to, you can do them a different colour. I just think it's nice, the pink against the blue and the white. But it's the same technique, and as I say, if your undercolour is a bit wet still, like the sap green, just thicken up your paint. Just get a big blob on the end of your nib, look like this. You just push against, or just dry your work. if you don't want to get any smudges. So look, it's not taking. Sometimes look, you need a lot of paint. But it's just to imply a nice flowering plant here in the corner. And then I'm just going to get some raw umber brown and some cobalt blue to make that dark colour again. And I'm just going to make it a little bit harsher just around the edge of that step. Just to have a nice shadow and just underneath the plant pot. So there we go. And then I'm just going to get a tiny bit of orange and I'm just going to put a nice highlight on the outer edge just so it looks like that bit's getting a bit of sunlight. So as I say, look, these were really vibrant a minute ago, weren't they? So just from drying, they've absorbed that yellow underneath. So look, by just going back with a clean brush and just putting some white again over the top, we can make these plants sparkle a little bit more, make them look a bit more nicer. So as I say, don't be discouraged if your acrylic painting dries a bit flat. Just go over the top of it and give it another coat of paint. I know with a lot of the tutorials with all the different channels here, because they're so quick, no one actually tells you little cheats and tricks, but this is an easy way to make your work look more realistic and more bright with acrylics. And then I'm just using the orange that we just used on the plant pot just to go around the letterbox, just to give it a bit of a brass sort of nice frame. And then let's just have a little bit of that orange just to add some heat onto the steps. Just a little bit of sunlight onto those steps. Ooh, it's starting to look really pretty. So let's get some of the shadow colour that we mixed up, which was that purple, cobalt blue, and cerulean blue, and some of that raw umber brown to get the colour that we use for the windows. And let's start blocking in our bike. So I love these sort of really old sort of posh bikes that you get with sort of flower baskets and handles. So why not, let's include one in the painting. So again, if you don't have a steady hand and you feel a bit nervous, you could always use tape to create straight lines. I'm going to go for it just without tape, but if you are struggling at home, you can always use tape. And you can always try and look up a reference photo. This picture, it's all from my imagination. There's loads of places that I've visited around the world, and you see these gorgeous sort of cobblestone sort of roads, and you have these beautiful white walls and these beautiful Bougainvillea plants and trees, just really, really vibrant colours like pinks and purples and greens and yellows against the white walls, and you have these beautiful coloured shutters and nice old cars and bikes. So trying to recreate it's really nice, it's good fun. So as I say, if anyone ever has any ideas for tutorials, please put them in the comments below and we'll try to include them in future tutorials. So all I'm doing, I'm just trying to create sort of the outer front, I don't know what it's called, the wheel guard or whatever, sort of goes around the wheel. I haven't decided what colour I want this bike. I was going for blue with everything because I just think it looks nice. But as I say, you're painting at home, you could have a red bike if you want to. You can change it up. Think of what your favourite colour is and you can apply it to your painting. So let's have another one here. Now I'm not very good at painting circles, as you can see. My wheels look kind of wonky, but I don't really know an easy way to paint a circle. I think you can cheat, like you can paint round something. So you could use something like the tube of a paint. You get the sort of round, what's it called, lid. Or you could use like a jar or something if you struggle. I wouldn't use a compass because the sharp needle edge would pierce your canvas and leave a horrible hole in your canvas. I wouldn't use a compass. But we're just going to wing it, and we're going to try and do it with our free hand. So on the back there could be a little storage area here. Why not? And a little chain. What's it called? The pedals. So let's just create a little pedal. And let's just make this a little bit rounder. So let's just kind of do a rough shape of the wheel, and we can neaten everything up. So I've got a big splotch on my wheel. We'll fix that in a minute, don't worry about that. Just kind of want to block everything in to see what everything is. So just use this colour as an outline for now. There we go. Let's put the handlebars in. Well, let's dry them. And then we could have a basket, couldn't we? With some more flowers. So let's create a nice basket. So I think for the basket, let's do the saddle first and then we'll start blocking in the basket. So we've got our outline, we know where everything is, so let's do the basket. So let's get some orange, and then let's get some brown, just to make it darker. Let's add some purple again. So orange, purple and brown. We should get a nice cool purpley brown. This could be our shadow colour first. So all we're trying to do is just create sort of a rectangle sort of basket here. And then let's get a little bit of blue and just add it to the mix. So a bit of blue. And just add cobalt blue, and raw umber makes this dark colour. So let's just make the actual basket, just the shadow here, just a bit harsher. And then while we've got the colour, let's make this saddle nice and dark, because you have these nice leather saddles, don't you? So just cobalt blue and raw umber brown. And we could use that for the wheels, couldn't we? So, as I say, it's not quite black. Raw umber brown and cobalt blue together. We should get a nice outline for our wheels. So I'm just using quite a thick brush. And I'm just loading up my paint. And I'm just pushing against the canvas and just trying to create a circle. And as I say, if it's wonky, we can paint around it later and just neaten it up. we just want sort of the general thickness of a tyre. There we go. And let's get some more paint and do the other one. This one's more like an egg shape. It's come out terrible. So let's try and fix this. It's like it's been squashed. Let's try and make it a little bit rounder. There we go. So as I say, we can fix it later. We just want to kind of get the general shape of it. Just have a little bit of shadow coming through here. A dark colour. Just on a little thing at the back. Make it a little bit straighter. And then while we've got that colour, why don't we make the handlebars a little bit darker? Because they sometimes have these little grips. Could have a little bell or something, couldn't it? And I'm just fast forwarding the video again, because all I'm doing, now that it's dry, I'm just using the white to go around it. So now we've blocked in our bike. I'm just going to paint the wall with some titanium white. And I can even put some nice little shimmers up here on that lovely shadow for our window. So we're just going to block in this area to get rid of that horrible blob next to our tyre. So as I say, you can cheat and make your tyres a little bit rounder by just painting in the wall. So don't worry if they're a bit wonky, just get some of the wall colour and just go around it. And just neaten them up, make them a bit smoother. So let's just paint all around this wheel. No one would ever know. Look at that. Let's do this side. As I say, we're just doing a tutorial. If you want it to be photorealistic, as I say, you could get something to paint around. It's totally up to you. Hopefully you're taking tips for these tutorials and using them for your own work. And then like try to not just recreate these ones, but try to apply the teachings to your own paintings. So let's just block in this white wall behind it. There we go, it looks a lot neater now. Just in these little gaps, just this nice scruffy. We're going to put a shadow here on the wheel, so don't worry if there's a little bit of that blue shining through. We are going to put a bit of a shadow in. So last bit here down the bottom, just where the pedals are. And then we're going to get some brown and blue. And we're going to get a really fine liner. And we're going to just go over on the bottom the cobblestones to create a nice sort of cobblestone path, like a road. So what I've got is a really elongated fine liner. So it's like a really thin brush that we use for painting things like branches. And then I've just got plenty of that blue and brown on the nib of the brush. And I'm just creating sort of zigzags. And I'm making them deliberately wonky. Look, I'm making them deliberately wonky to look like crazy paving, as we would call it in the UK. Just basically wonky slates on the floor. And again, this just texturizes it. It just makes it look more realistic. So it's an easy trick. If you lay the colour underneath, we did a Greek painting about a month or so ago, didn't we, where we had sort of like a Spanish courtyard or like a Greek courtyard. We did a very similar thing with some steps and a beautiful white houses. So check that tutorial out. I'll put it up in the corner now and you can have a look. It's got similar teachings where you've got like steps and cobblestones. And it's the same colour palette with the whites and the blues. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just creating little zigzags. And because we've got those nice sort of colours at the bottom, we've got the sort of raw sienna stained canvas, and then we've got some of that cool blue as a shadow. Now that we're putting the detail over the top, again, just tricks your eyes, just makes it look more 3D. So let's just finish this corner. Create our wonky zigzags. As I say, it's much easier if you've got a really thin brush. Just do really thin lines. Does it all for you. There we go. Easy peasy, look at that. Looks super cool. And then while that colour that we mixed earlier, which was cerulean blue and white, I'm just going to put like a bit of a shine here on the metal. So a bit like what we did with the doors. Just so it's like got a bit of a shimmer in the sunlight. As I say, I don't know what colour. I don't know if we should have a lighter bike or a darker bike. I think it looks better darker, but we could have a little bit of a shimmer first. As I say, because I paint a lot of these tutorials from my imagination, I'm making it up as I go along. And I shouldn't be really telling you this, but hey ho, why not? Like, and because I'm making it up as I'm going along, sometimes I'm a bit indecisive because, as I say, you don't know what's going to work until you try it. And because you're filming it, if I change something and I went from one colour to another, I can't really cut that out of the video. All you guys following along at home would be like, what the hell is going on? So, as I say, you have to be a good artist, you have to experiment sometimes. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But you got to try things out because you won't know if it works until you try it. So what I was trying to do is create sort of a shimmer on the metal. But I don't think it kind of works. And I think because the wall is so white behind it, it would look better as a darker colour. But we'll put the shimmer on first. So let's have a little bit on the outer ridge here, just getting a bit of the sunlight. And just on this metal sort of hubcap bit. Wheel guard, I don't know what you call it. Fender, is that what it's called? So let's just make it a bit more curved. And then let's just get some of the darker blue that we use for the shadow colour. Let's add a little bit more brown to it to make it greyer. A bit more purple to make it cooler. Let's just put a harsher shadow on the bottom, just so it looks like one edge is in the sun and one edge is getting a bit more shade. And then let's do the same on the other wheel, so just on the underneath. And then we'll do a tiny bit just on the back end of this bit. As I say, what put a bit here. And then why not? Let's get some orange and yellow. And then let's just start putting some ridges to make this like a wicker basket. While we're thinking of what colour to paint the bike and fiddle with it, let's make this into sort of like a wicker basket. Make it a bit more vibrant. So some orange and yellow. I'm just using some raw umber just to put in some shadow. Just give it a little bit of texture. You can use some of that grey blue that we just mixed up if you want to put some ridges in just for the wicker. Again, just so it's not so harsh. We just want to create the illusion of some detail. And then if we make sure our lovely handlebars are a bit dark. And as I said to you previously, if anything is a bit wonky, you can use some white for the wall colour and you can just straighten up areas. So if you're like me and you find you paint a bit wonky, because painting a straight line is actually quite difficult, especially when you've got a big blob of paint on the edge of your brush. So you can just paint the wall around it to straighten it up. So I'm just getting some yellow, just to put a little bit of a highlight here, just for this bit of the basket to be in the sunlight. And then let's get some white and pink. And let's start adding some flowers. So again, I was going to have them pink, and then I think maybe let's go for more of a peach colour. So while we've got this pink, all it is pink and white. I was going back and forth between sort of magenta and pink, but I think it looks a bit too samey because obviously we've got this one down here. So while I've got that colour, I'm just going to highlight some of these flowers on the right hand side just with some white and pink. So I'm just going to highlight the right hand side, just to make it look all pretty. Let's just have some on the left, getting a bit of sun, why not? This could be a nice pretty plant. And I think I was just using some white to go around the edges just to make it look a bit more flowery, but I thought it's too similar to the plant on the left and the cherry blossom tree, or the Bougainvillea. So I thought, why not? Let's change the colour. So let's get some yellow and some orange. Let's get some yellow and orange to make a peach colour. And let's make them like the flowers in the hanging basket. I think just a change in colour will just make it look a bit prettier. As I say, sometimes it's a bit samey, so just having a variation in colour can make a big difference. So I'm just putting a bit more yellow in. Could be someone's had a delivery of flowers and they've been making their hanging baskets and things like that, why not? I'm just using some sap green, again, just like we did with the hanging basket, just to create some leaves in between. So I'm going to get some yellow, orange and purple. So yellow, orange and purple to make a tan colour, a bit like what we use for the hanging baskets and the wicker basket. And I'm just going to go around my wheel to create a nice sort of tan colour on the rubber. Just some of these rickety old bikes, they have these lovely sort of tan wheels with sort of white rims. So we're just going to use this sort of nice colour. We can put a little highlight here on our saddle. See if that works. Let's do the other wheel. It's sort of a colour of a cookie. So orange, yellow and a little bit of purple. You can add a tiny bit of white if you want to. But you just kind of want this tanny colour. And I'm trying to leave a little bit of the dark outline. Can you see the dark outline that we had underneath? Just to sort of give it a nice outline. So that's cool. And I think by just getting some raw umber and blue, I could just go around that saddle. Now we put the highlight on. And then let's get some of this lighter blue, which was white, cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. So lots and lots of white, tiny bit of cobalt blue and some cerulean blue. And let's just put some highlights here on the steps. Just have a few, just like we did with the window shutters. The same technique. And then let's just get our cool blue, so our darker blue, which was purple, cerulean blue, cobalt blue and less white. And then let's just put our shadow back on our wall. So if you think that lovely rickety old bike is leaning against the wall and it's going to have a shadow cascading on it. So we can use our cool blue. We can just go around the wheels. It should look a lot neater now. Now we've blocked in the lovely white wall. So the same colour we use for the shadows on the wall, around the windows and next to the tree. We're just going to go around, try to create a shadow around this bike. Let's have a little bit here where the handlebars are. Tiny bit around the basket. And then let's have some behind the saddle. See, I think now we're putting on this shadow. I think the bike and the shadow is too similar a colour, so we might have to darken her up a little bit. But it's good to experiment. Let's just put the shadow on first and we'll see. So let's have a little bit here. Some under the wheels. So as I say, take your time. A big bit here, just joining up against the wall. Some underneath here. And then against this wheel. And then once we've done all these shadows, we know where everything is, we can start putting things like the spokes on the wheels and things like that. So I was going to have some weeds and things poking up through the cobblestones, but I don't think I think it would look scruffy. I think I like the cobblestones how they are. So let's just have a bit of a shadow here, just next to this fender, just sort of cascading around it. So let's just darken the bike up a bit. So I'm just using the shadow colour that we use for the windows. And if any of your highlights have dried a bit flat, look, as I say, look, just like here on my saddle, just go over the top. Where it's absorbed some of the shadow colour underneath, it just dries a bit dark. So look, if you want to make them vibrant, just go over the top. There we go. And let's just go with the shadow colour. So this nice, cool blue. I think the bike just looks better darker, simply for the fact it stands against the wall a bit better, doesn't it? So let's just have this bit coming down from the handlebars. So let's just make them look a bit darker. Bring it all the way down. That looks better. And then let's just make this little bit of the basket a bit darker. This bit where it joins the wheel, just going to outline. So let's say it's much easier to use a really thin brush. So if you use a really thin brush, you can get really fine detail. Makes your life so much easier. Just come down here, join it to the wheel, make it more straight, just this sort of T-bar shape, bring it down. Coming down from the saddle. So all I'm doing, it's a bit like having a really fine liner. I'm just outlining everything, trying to get a little bit definition. Where you've got the colour of the bike and then you've got the blue shadow, by just having a really sharp outline like here, you can just create a bit of definition between the insides and the outside. So just going around the wheels. So none of this is super difficult. It's just fiddly and it's just time consuming. And like I say in all the tutorials, having patience, relaxing, enjoying your work. So it's always good to paint things you enjoy, because then you'll have fun doing it. And don't try to keep up with everyone else. Everyone that's at different levels of skill. So just go at your own pace. Use the brushes that I'm saying to use, because it will make your life a lot easier by having different types of brushes. Because if you're trying to use a really big chunky brush now to do all this sort of fine outlining, it will just come out really blocky and horrible. And these brushes are super cheap. Like, as I say, a fine liner is about £1. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to go and get a certain make. You just want to have like a variety of shapes and sizes. So there we go, this nice little outline here. Let's make this fender a bit sharper. And then we're going to mix up a new colour. We're going to mix up this dark colour. We're going to get some of that cool blue that we mixed up earlier, which was cerulean blue, cobalt blue, and purple and white. And we're going to add a little bit of the cobalt blue and a little bit of raw umber brown to get a grey. So all we're doing, we're just combining the shadow colour that we've been using with some cobalt blue and raw umber brown to make it more grey. Still got plenty of white in it. And then this warm grey, what we're going to do, we're going to use this to paint the spokes in the wheel. So again, I'm using a really fine liner, just like what we use for the cracks in the cobblestones. And I'm just using this fine liner to create the spokes in the wheel. Now I was coming out all diagonally to do these ones first, but you can just go out from the middle. So eventually I just started changing it and going out from the middle. But again, if you use a fine liner, look how elongated the nib of the brush is. The bristles are really, really thin and all pushed together. So it makes this so much easier because the brush is just so thin. Look, so when I just do a line, it's so much easier. If you, again, find it hard to paint straight lines, you can always use the tape. You can always use a thing like a flat-headed brush, which basically has just a flat head. That might be easier. So all we're doing, look, we're just painting the spokes. Here we go. No bother. Kind of look okay. And then let's do this one. Same thing with the wheel. Oh, I think a big dark cloud just came over again. So let's just do this one. So what I tend to do is I get quite a lot of paint on my brush, and I have the brush quite damp, so dip it in a little bit of water and then get quite a lot of paint on your brush, and then it should be much easier just to like a smooth line when you're going across the canvas. Just use that edge just so it's nice and straight. Oops, got not enough paint. Let's get some more paint. There we go. So all going towards the middle. There we go. And then with the white, let's just add a little bit of raw umber to white. So pure titanium white and just a tiny bit of raw umber, just to make sort of a beige colour. And then with our fine liner, what we're going to do, we're just going to go around the middle of our tyres. So you get these lovely old bikes, and they have sort of white rimmed tyres, you know, like old cars with like Cadillacs and stuff, where they have these lovely sort of white rimmed tyres. So we're just going to try and do the same with this beige. So trying to be less wonky. It's hard for me. I'm a big bloke. I find it hard being so technical. But if we put it on first, we can always neaten it up a little bit. So we're just trying to leave a little bit of the dark either side, just so it's got an outline. So I'm trying to go around the middle, just so it looks like it's got an outline. And then as it goes towards the fender on both tyres, I'm just leaving it to be quite dark, just so it looks like a bit more it's in the shade. So let's get some of that grey we mixed up. Actually, let's get some of the beige and put a little bit of orange into the mix. So we're just going to put a tiny bit of orange, just like we did with the basket. And we're just going to make this look like it's a piece of wood. So sometimes you get these little wooden shelf things where you can put bits on your bike, strap it up. So let's make that like a little wooden thing attached to the bike. And I put a little bit of this nice orange just on the tips of the wheels. So again, it's just not such a big jump from the beige to the brown. And then all I'm doing, I'm just getting a tiny bit of titanium white. I'm just going to put a shimmer on the metal, just really subtly. So when you have a curve, if you ever look like a cola can or something like a glass, you get a nice sheen on one side, don't you? So we're just using some white just to represent that sheen on the metal. And then let's just get some of our cool blue that we mixed up. So cerulean blue, cobalt blue, purple and white. And then let's just put in our shadow just to finish her off. And now we've got our spokes. Make sure your spokes in your wheels are dry before you paint over it, just so you don't muddle them all together. We're just going to make our shadow a bit more harsh. There we go. Just where the petals are. Just around the basket. Let's have some on the wheels. So let's just have a little bit of a curve on the wheels. Just underneath the chain bit. Just here where the pedals are. And then just to finish her, we're going to get pure titanium white and we're going to put some of the sunlight speckles in the shadow. So again, we can even have some on the bike itself. So it looks like the sunlight is hitting the metal of the bike and it's creating these lovely sort of glimmers in the shadow. So just like we've done with the shutters and the door, we're doing the same trick. So the same trick over and over again. So I'm just getting pure titanium white. I'm just putting these light sparkles in the shadow. And then just to finish her off, I'm just getting some of that brown and cobalt blue to create that really dark outline colour. And just little areas where I've gone over with the shadow or with the white. I'm just neatening up with my fine liner just to give her an outline, just to make the metal just stand out against that shadow in the background. So as I say, take your own time. Obviously it's a very long video today because we're being very technical, but if you wanted to paint this video over a few days, this painting, sorry, take your time. Go at your own speed. So we're just doing the fine detail around the chain. Got the pedal. So the fine details always last if you just think that the colours, we've got to always lay the shadow foundation and then we put the highlights and the detail over the top. But can you see now with the cool blue around the bike, that's what's making it look so realistic. All this extra detail on the bike now is making it come alive, but it's the colours, all that hard work we did at the beginning, that is making it look real. So let's do this one edge, and she's looking really realistic, so I think she's pretty much done. Let's just do this one. Here we go. Finito. So there we go. So I've signed her in the bottom corner in pink. So we've got this lovely Bougainvillea tree or cherry blossom tree, and we've got these lovely cascading shadows on the wall. We've got dark colours to bring it forward and have a shadow and light. We've got how to paint a door, how to paint a house, how to paint steps. We've got our courtyard, our rickety floor. We've got our lovely shutters and shimmer on our glass with our wild flowers. You've learned how to poke sky holes to make your tree look more realistic and have leaves. We've got this lovely flower pot. And of course we've got our beautiful rickety old bike where we've got highlights and shadows as well. So really detailed tutorial today. Well done for everyone attempting it. Don't forget to tag me at Stewart Paintings with your version of the tutorial so I can see all your excellent work at home. And Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and have a fantastic week ahead. Happy painting, everyone. See you soon. Bye now.